Здраво, денеска сме во второто издание на подкастот на кинотека Кино Муабети и на наше големо задоволство и чест го имаме со нас Кшиштоф Зануси, еден од најпознатите и најголемите режисери на полското кино. Имаме шанса да поразговараме со него. Hi, nice to meet you, Mr. Zanusi. It is our honor and really great honor to have you here.
Thank you.
First, I would like to ask you, I know that you are second time in Skopje.
Right.
Maybe it's a cliché question, but I really want to ask you, do you enjoying?
Of course I do. If I haven't, I would have left.
Yeah, okay. So I will first wanted to ask you about one question. Maybe it's the longer explanation, but we had a chance, 1 month ago, we had a chance to promote one book, a theoretical book about history of Eastern European or Middle European cinema, specifically Hungarian, Czechoslovak and Polish cinema, and there was a lot of references about your films. But the question is not just, it's not specifically about your films. I was curious because one of the points that the woman who wrote, the Indina Jordanova, made, it's about the system of producing in communist time in this part of Europe, and he was writing not just to criticize it, but to make some comparison, like from the communist time, communist production of the cinema and capitalist, understand Western market societies. Her point was that censorship. There was one paradox that behind iron curtains, films were made, produced, and then they were censors. And the point was that there was also censorship in the Western Europe, but if in Eastern and Middle Europe the censorship was based of ideological values, either if the film is against country or against Marxist official ideology, in the Eastern Europe the market is the main value, and she mentioned that. In the America, for example, or in Western Europe, the films usually doesn't made if they don't have that kind of market value, and this is also for her some censorship. So I just wanted to ask, because you are shooting films in that time and you are still active now, comparison between differences between made film in the times of communism and how you produce film now. There is some difference, and there is, I want to know that in person because I read the book and I'm not sure if...
Well, I've seen the book, but I haven't read it.
It's really a great book.
Now you invite me to write a similar book. It will take us a couple of hours because the comparison is quite large. Yeah. But first of all, you have to compare societies. I hope this is done in the book.
Yeah, it is.
Because we had very strong selection of our competitors. Competitors were foreign films shown in our countries. And I remember that even in the 70s, when some tourists from Soviet Union were arriving to Poland, straight from the railway station, they were running to cinema to see a Western, because Westerns were never shown in Soviet Union and were commonly shown in Poland. So the bloc was not unified. We had big differences, and relatively in the 70s, but also in the 60s, I think we enjoyed more freedom than our neighboring countries, because tourists were running to see films in Poland and not in Czechoslovakia, especially not after 68. And this has changed, the profile of the audience has changed. And I think it is a little bit demagogical to call market censorship. It is another system of elimination. That's true. Well, if you want to call it censorship, you may call it censorship, but that's crisis of values behind it. Because when you say that product that sells best is the best product, you cancel all idea of value. Because James Bond is selling well, but what it leaves when you finish the screening? Rather nothing. There has no particular cognitive values. It has it is entertaining to some extent.
Entertainment.
Right, but that's what is in English called, what culture is called. And I think this is a major problem of our society, that big numbers impress even the critics. Critics have no reference to values. And of course, no novel of Joseph Conrad or Thomas Mann will sell as well as Agatha Christie. But Agatha Christie is a light entertainment of limited importance for our culture. And let us say Thomas Mann is one of the writers who marked the whole century, like Albert Camus and a couple of others.
My favorite writers, actually.
Right, but they were not selling that well as some commercial books did. So if you confuse the values, then you cannot make a comparison.
Yeah, okay. I think that's the good answer. So my second question is connected similarly to your last point about the crisis of our society today. And personally, I think that your films and that moral anxiety that they try to put you, I still find in your last film some themes, ideas that are actually you exploring through mathematics and physics the crisis of morals of modern society. Does your stories and ideas and approach also changed during the films that you made until 90s and after? Does your approach change something in your approach and in your vision? Because when I see the film, I really enjoy it because it's make me think, which is rarely in these days to have a film that make you think, not just to say to eat the popcorns and after that, okay, I will go to do my kids and okay, I will have entertainment. So first, it's difficult for you to still make that film. There is still some people that question it, like that they want to watch it. And what changed to your approach?
Listen,
is something changed?
I was laughing when you were asking your question because you fall in your own trap.
Okay.
You must not be a director and a critic at the same person. So I refuse to be critic of my own work because I don't want you to be unemployed. I want you to have your job. And you may notice what happened to my messages, what happened to my stories. Are they similar or different? There is a well-known saying that each author, especially in literature, is writing the same novel all his life long. And it applies to Joseph Conrad and to Thomas Mann and to Dostoevsky quite precisely. They are writing the same novel in various forms. Probably I do the same, but I'm not even aware. I mostly do author films. I made very few films that were commissioned, and only because I was deeply in sympathy with the material, maybe except one experience in America. So it did change a lot, and as conservatives say, everything has to change so that everything remains the same. In fact, human nature did not change, and I was just recently reminded that humanity, after so many centuries of development, did not invent one single new sin. What Moise got on his tables is still actual, and there is nothing more. You cannot have any more sins than you had among the 10 commandments.
Yeah. Mr. Zanussi, you started your career in the 60s. Were you influenced by the French New Wave or American New Wave at the time?
Well, not American. But
they were a bit later, probably in the 70s.
Yes, and that was mostly, it was definitely a French New Wave. As a student of film school in Łódź, I say Łódź to make it understandable, Łódź is in Polish. I got this opportunity to go abroad, and I interviewed most of the new wave directors, and I, of course, wanted to be present on their set, so I visited Truffaut, Chabrol, Godard, and René, and this was a great experience for me. I came back to Poland, and at that time, very few people had an opportunity to travel abroad, so my professors did not travel. And I've made my schoolwork influenced by New Wave, with handheld camera, actors or not actors improvising in front of camera. And because of that, I got kicked out from the film school, because professors told me, you came to us as an amateur, you are trained to be a professional, and you are amateur again. This is an amateurish way of shooting film. So I had a very hard decision to take, to accept this criticism, even if it was definitely contre cœur, it was not what I really thought. But I had to apologize, make a very regular academic work, and then I was readmitted to the film school and I finished it. But it was a good lesson of relativity, because a few years later my professor said, well, it was not all that wrong what you did.
You also studied philosophy.
I did, yes. I'm very proud of it.
Can you tell us something more about your engagement in philosophy?
I am not, at that time, in the beginning of the 60s, when I was studying philosophy, I studied in the State University of Krakow. And it was the only university, state university, from Elbau till Vladivostok, when non-Marxist philosophy was taught. It was a regular course of, I don't know how it was under Tito in Yugoslavia.
It was also more liberal. We have a Marxism, our own vision of Marxism. It was strictly Yugoslavian, but I think it was not that kind of strict. There was still teaching some kind of.
Soviets were very strict about it, and we had. There's only one exception, because there was a very famous philosopher, a pupil of Husserl, and a colleague of Edith Stein. So, because of his great position, when there was a liberalization after '56. He was brought back to his chair at Jagiellonian Krakow University, and he had the same curriculum like before the war. So I was very attracted by the whole milieu, but not by phenomenology that was taught. Phenomenology was not particularly close to my temperament, because I was already having behind me 4 years of studies of physics. So I had no longing for precision. I thought in science you have more precision than in philosophy anyway. So I was rather inclined towards existentialism and something what is on the edge of literature and and philosophy. But I cannot say now that I have clear-cut philosophical orientation. But definitely, I like this style, of Socrates' style of philosophizing, and not this academic. Definitely, I am very strongly an opponent of postmodernism, which I think is a very destructive philosophy, and but has one merit, because it destroyed Marxism, and it is a bastard of Marxism. But that's something what I strongly dislike, and I made a film in which postmodernism is a negative hero, and the very rich oligarch, before dying, wants to make a donation to make most harm to humanity. And he says, let us give scholarship to postmodernist philosophers and support their departments. And then they will fool the youth, and youth will destroy our civilization. That's his program on the film. I'm very proud of it. It made many critics very angry, because they are all postmodern. Not all, but many.
During your career, you worked with some very famous actors. For example, you worked with Max von Sydow, Robert Powell, one forgotten actor but very good actor, who also collaborated with Franco Zeffirelli and Ken Russell, I think. Can you tell us something more about these collaborations?
Well,
You also worked with Sam Neill, I think.
Oh yes, Neil was a lead
yeah.
in my field of the greatest budget I ever had, because that was financed by Americans. Yes, I
About
had
the
this
life
privilege.
of the Pope.
Of the Pope.
Yeah,
You didn't mention Vittorio Gassman,
Vittorio
who
Gassman.
is another
Yeah.
great genius.
Of course.
And I would say also Nikita Mikhalkov, with whom I always disagreed about the ideas, but he's an extremely talented actor. And Marie-Christine Barrault, who was in one of my films. So I had this privilege of working with big names because they were attracted to play parts which I was offering them. They were not seduced by high budgets. Usually they had to make big concessions in order to accept my offer. But it happened, and there was another, I think she is an Oscar winner, Sarah Miles, the Ryan's daughter.
Yeah, for the Ryan's
So she was
daughter,
also in one.
beautiful film by David Lean.
Right, but I worked with her in my Silent Touch. So yes, I had this opportunity to work with first-class actors, and it is always very stimulating when you meet a real personality. Like with Gassman, I wrote a part for him, and I said, I am a tailor, I can make a suit for you, and it will suit you easily, but you have to give me a promise that when I do it, you will take it. And in fact, he did it, even if it was in collision with his other projects, because he liked the part. Oh, another one, Rafa Vallone was in one of my films, also quite great character and actor from the neo-realist time.
Yeah. And you very regularly collaborated with Wojciech Kila,
Oh, it was a rule. We were
one of the greatest composers of film music in our times.
I believe he was, and I worked with him in all my films with no exception. So that's the only case in history of cinema that we had like 70 collaborations, because I was also using his
70.
music.
Yeah,
Yes, including short films, television films, documentaries, and stage plays, because I direct a lot on stage. But I was always using his music, except now when he passed away. So I take classical music because I feel it will be a betrayal to ask for another composer. I respect other composers very much, and he respected some of his colleagues. But it would be difficult for me to ask somebody else.
I want to ask you one question, because I didn't know before that we discussed that your work was also on stage. Differences.
Half of my work is on
Yeah,
stage, but not in Poland. I work mostly in other countries.
The difference from your approach when you work in stage and in film.
Oh, it has been described so many times. There are some basic differences in how to administer time on stage. I have time to transform an actor, to influence him or her. In cinema, I have premiere in 15 minutes, so I must take what is ready. I can talk before the shooting, but that's not form of rehearsal. Rehearsal is specific for theater, and otherwise, more or less, it is the same. Only that in theater we use more artificial means. People don't speak normally. They speak very loud. And this is, again, something specific for theater. In film, it sounds false. In theater, we don't mention it. But otherwise, it is for me always kind of a laboratory, when I can develop something. And with some of my actors, I worked on stage and then on film, because we already had some experience. What can I say more? I've just recently got a prize in Italy for my stage play, and the stage play was brought to the prison because it takes part in prison. So I had a screening and a show and a meeting with prisoners in the biggest prison of Italy, in Naples. That was 2 weeks ago. And I find this very unique experience because for the prisoners, screening is basically different than participating in live theater. I never felt this difference so strong as I did feel it in prison.
Yeah, that was really, I think, a great experience because did the prisoners enjoy the play?
Well, they discussed it. That's not that they didn't evaluate it even. They were just comparing it to their experience and their reality because they take part in prison.
Okay. I just want to ask you maybe one personal question, but I'm always curious when, you know, some great directors coming. What was your, because you said that you studied first physics, then philosophy, at the end film directing. What was your main drive to study film? To learn to, there was something, usually, you know, there was always a story when, you know, some directors were going like kid to cinema, and there was, you know, like amazed by, you know, the magic of the screen and everything. There is some particular reason why you, or
hard to say because
no, it's hard to say.
Retrospectively, of course, I can trace what was from the beginning. During the Second World War, when I was a child, but I was 4 or 5 years old. It was unadmissible in occupied country to go to cinema. So I've heard from parents that there is such a thing like cinema. You will see when the war will be over, we will go to cinema. And we went immediately. A few days after the end of the war, we went to cinema. I've seen some American comedy. I remember White Phone as a prop and nothing more. But later on, in the grey time of Stalinist period, cinema gave me a view of the world which I could not imagine. The film that really impressed me was La Chartreuse du Parme, the Stendhal adaptation made by Christian Jacques with Gérard Philippe. It was amazing because I've never heard about such love, about such sacrifice, about such characters, amazing actors playing in it. So this struck me a lot. Since then I was very interested in cinema. And as they did not allow kids to enter films, to see films for adults, I had to borrow my father's hat and go to classes. And then I was tall enough so I was able to penetrate films in which people kissed each other. This was considered extremely daring, and children were not supposed to see people kissing each other. That was very old time inhibition. Anyway, but I didn't think I will ever be a filmmaker. And only when I got kicked out from the film school, I realized how much I want to do it. Because I want to tell stories. I want to tell what I've observed, what I have imagined, but usually based on some observation. And to tell stories to the others. And that's what I do all my life long now. I had many other offers to have different life. I have multimillionaires who are my very far relatives in Italy. And they were offering me studies and work in their business. I would have been a very rich man, but I wouldn't have had this biography I have behind me, and I'm happy. I was very lucky with my biography, so I couldn't have more interesting life.
So actually, some of the decisions on the characters in the film we saw yesterday, it remind me of what you said that. So
yes, well, of course, the film is a projection of my own belief. And many times I was already as a grown-up man, at the time of transition, I was seriously invited to be in the government and to be in diplomacy. So I have some experience with diplomacy, but always as an artist. I don't want to change. Now it is definitely not the time to talk about changes, but I never wanted to do something else.
Mr. Zanussi, you were one of the well-known directors from Eastern Europe in America. Roger Ebert wrote regularly about your films, very positive reviews, and also Susan Sontag wrote something about your film Spirala,
Right.
The Spiral. I enjoyed that film. It was a very interesting and touching experience. Can you tell us something more? Did you know personally
Yes, I
some
know
of the
both.
critics, Roger Ebert or
I knew both of
Susan
them.
Sontag?
Susan Sontag I had.
Uh-huh.
We crossed many times because she was very leftist and I was
Yeah,
at the time when we have
and we have
military-
spoken about
right,
her
but fortunately
activities.
she expressed
Mm-hmm.
her regrets. He said I was wrong.
Uh-huh.
And well, she had this very ideological orientation, and she thought that Soviet Union is the country of progress. But in the 80s, she discovered that she was wrong, and she admitted it. What was courageous,
Yeah.
because she lost many followers, but at the same time, she recovered from some kind of fixation that she had.
Yeah.
But originally, I remember we were in the jury in that Chicago Film Festival, I guess, and we were crossed and fought all the time. And I was telling her she is not fair in her judgment, and she was saying, "Oh, you have no right because you're not in your country. When you are in Poland, then we will discuss," and so on, so on. The funny thing is that I told her about one of my most unhappy experiences in America, when I got an access to somebody who was president of Columbia Pictures. And of course I prepared a pitch to tell what kind of film I would like to make. And this gentleman, after this short presentation, used an expression I've never heard before. He said, "How uninteresting." So I realized that it was a catastrophe. I tested this story on other people. And I told it to Susan Sontag a year later, trying to, she said, "Well, but what was the story?" I told her the story. She said, no, I understand why he kicked you out, because it was absolutely non-American style to climb to the president of the corporation when you are an unknown director or little-known director. But, she said, the story is interesting, and later on she wrote a novel based on this story, well, about this person, the great actress from Poland who made a very astonishing career in America, having terrible accent, playing Hamlet. And Helen Modjeska. And so she wrote a novel, then I was offered to direct this novel, then Jerzy Skolimowski was considered the director. Finally, this novel was never filmed, but that's an interesting result of of whispering a story that artists exchange very often. Of course, I feel it's okay that she has taken this story and made it a novel. She did it very feministic. My approach was not that much focused on feminism, but of an idea of somebody who had a world career and suddenly on the new territory in a new language. In California, she's totally unknown. And she did a test in the theater. And after the test, the local theater manager asked, "But did you ever play on stage?" And she was world famous in Europe. And the emperors, presidents, kings were bringing her flowers. And then somebody asked, "Did you ever act?"
Yeah,
So it was ironic.
Ironic, and in the sometimes in we have for example, in Macedonia, some of actors who didn't learn in academy, but they were natural.
Yeah.
So actually, the good film actors sometimes don't need.
Well, if you have a strong personality.
Yes,
They are
if you have
And some
personality-
capacity which is given, but some
Yes,
people
yes,
have clear pronunciation, some people have not.
yes. Like one of the famous Serbian actor in the Yugoslavian actor in the past times was not study in academy, and he was one of the best actors that I know. So, but he was natural.
Right. Rav Alone was, I think,
Yes.
was an engineer. and had nothing to do with acting
Yeah.
as a training.
Okay.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you something about music. You're obviously a music fan. You collaborated with such a great composer like Wojciech Killer. What do you think about the rock music as a film score?
I don't mind, but this is not my cup of tea.
Not your cup of tea, yeah.
Definitely, but it is not only because it is rock,
What do you think
but
about...
because it is a pop music.
Yeah, but for example, Michelangelo Antonioni did a great job with Pink Floyd, for me.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
he did.
I'm a fan of the Antonioni's films and Pink Floyd also, but I really think that he did a really, really great job with the score at Zabrisky's point.
Yes, except that the whole Zabrisky's Point was not a really successful film.
Because at the time.
No, I think for any time, because it is somehow a result of speculation. That's how Antonioni was talking about it. And I remember I spoke with him about he rather regretted that he got lured by America, because he didn't feel in these frequencies which were actual for America. And for all of us Europeans who were trying to do something in America, there was always the same obstacle. Milos Forman put it in a very nice way. He said, "You must not ever make film in America if you don't love Coca-Cola and hamburger. I don't like hamburger, I don't drink Coca-Cola, so I have no chance." No, this means I have no contact with American pop audience. And America has only pop audience. The rest is only in big cities at universities.
Yeah.
So we have to admit that world is different from various perspectives. And I'm not interested very much in popular culture in general. I think we achieved something as humanity by centuries of development and growth. And it brought us to Mozart, and maybe to Ligeti and Luigi Nono and whoever you want from contemporary composers.
Yeah.
But this is the most sophisticated line that was growing through centuries. And in the meantime, there was always pop music, which is using some elements of more advanced music. But it's the same applies to literature, to film, to painting. And we are living now in the time when pop culture becomes dominant. What for many people that's a promotion, but for most advanced avant-garde, let us say, sections of society, it is a moment when it gets lost.
Okay. I think that we will, in the end I wanted to ask one question regarding the Polish cinema at the moment. Last film that I watched, honestly, that was Polish, was Corpus Christi. Yeah. So I was just curious, how is it now at the moment regarding the Polish cinema? It's still vibrant, vivant. There is still some authors that can, slap you in the.
I think there is life. However, COVID made lots of harm to cinema, and Netflix did the same. But Netflix is already in problems, has already problems, so we hope we will survive. With traditional cinema in the black hole, where I have 100% of the attention of the audience with me, while in Netflix I know that people are calling and they are watching films on cell phones. So it is definitely not what gives us great chances for the future. But we have still about 40 feature films shot per year, and I still find some of them quite original and interesting. But we feel the moment of transition. We have big political fights inside the country. We were far more peaceful in the past and far more united. Now we are not. So it reflects in cinema. And there is a whole current of propagandistic, ultra-patriotic cinema, which doesn't have doesn't evoke great enthusiasm of the public. And I don't like it neither, because it's not sincere. you feel it, that it's commissioned and not
Propaganda.
comes
Propaganda,
comes not out of your heart. But still, I don't complain. I think we are in confusion like all the rest of Europe, but not worse. So that's already all right.
There is some film, for example, from contemporary Polish cinema that you can, I don't know, suggest us or something, some author.
Oh, well, I like, for example, the debutant whose film was called Supernova. It's a very extremely modest and very profound film about, well, something metaphysical, about a man who killed somebody in the car accident. And it is beautifully done and very moving.
Thank you. Ready for some other question?
Well, I think that we can finish.
Just before to end, we have to give you one present.
Oh,
This is
the
special.
present.
This is DVDs
Oh, really?
from Macedonian films.
Right.
Restored, old one.
Oh, thank you.
I think that you will enjoy.
Find something interesting.
Maybe some of them you know, maybe some of them you don't know,
but
but
that's
I think
very
it's,
nice.
yeah.
And of course, I will share it with both cinematographers. Probably they don't have
Probably.
it.
So this is one of the two most famous Macedonian directors from the past.
Yeah.
This is also one older one from the 60s, 70s. So
Right.
this is the films. I think that you will also like it.
I will be happy, and
Yes.
summer ahead, so I will have time
Yes.
to watch these films at the evening. Probably whole months it will be.
It's big. It's big. So they are like restored. I think all of them are the film, the old one until I think the oldest one
Digitalized.
from
And I hope they have some subtitles.
Of course.
Yeah.
So this is like
And Dolby Surround.
everything
Yeah,
remastered.
yeah.
So I think that you will like it. And
Wow.
this is actually the first Macedonian film
Yeah.
Ever
in
done.
the 50s. The first
Oh, I
one.
see.
Yeah, it's historical. Yeah.
I see.
This okay. So I think that you will.
All right. I don't promise I will see them all entire,
Yeah,
but I will do my best and take them into my
Yes.
bag. So that's
Yeah. So
great
just
gift. Thank
to
you
know
very
little
much.
about our films and everything. So it was really nice talking to you.
Yeah. It was
I
an honor.
hope that we will have chance to come again in Skopje. I know it's.
With my age, there are
yeah,
no plans,
but,
but there are always, their hope is always there.
always hope is there. So really thank you again. Значи, Јане, ако имаш нешто за крај да кажеш?
Па јас сум преблагодарен за оваа шанса што имавме можност да разговараме ја и ти со една вака легенда и се надевам дека се слушаме, се гледаме у следната епизода.
Да. Значи ви благодарам.
Next episode of the
Right, I
cinema.
noticed it.
Значи ова беше втората епизода од подкастот Кино Муавети. По наредните ќе имаме уште гости и дискусија на тоа да го ставиме за последниот пат.
Thank you.
Довидување.
Довидување.
Довидување.